Jono is a veteran gambler, has been for a long time, particularly in horse racing. A very good handicapper. And you met up with a gentleman in Las Vegas.
Very long detail. I met up with him here in New York.
Or in New York.
But it involved Las Vegas. Happened over 9 months. Happened in Las Vegas, New York. Involved lots of people, including the comedian Louis Anderson. But the long story short is I got swindled out of $65,000. The Peter Falconee story. Okay, this story begins in February of 2002. One of my very best friends, if not my best friend from law school, is a fellow named Patrick Smith, we call him Pat. And he was leaving his job as a prosecutor in the Southern District of New York, very prominent prosecutor there. Mm-hmm. He had prosecuted the world's largest Ponzi scheme, some major stock frauds, stuff like that. He had decided he needed to change gears a little bit, and he had accepted a job as a federal prosecutor in the Northern Mariana Islands, mm-hmm. in the Pacific, which is affiliated with the U.S., and there are federal prosecutors there. And so in February 2002, he was preparing to move to Saipan, and I was preparing to go for a month to Hong Kong, where my sister was living at the time. And this was during a period, I took a self-created sabbatical hiatus from Egg and Gum and spent 18 months without a job and happily traveling around the world enjoying myself. This was during that period. And so I wasn't going to be able to make it to Pat's big going away party, and so we had a little going away function that was just me, Pat, and a friend of his from the U.S. Attorney's Office, another prosecutor named Roberto Finzi. Mm-hmm. Roberto is a very interesting fellow. He's a Jewish-Italian fellow, first language is Italian, and he prosecutes mafiosos in New York. Anyway, we decide to go to a OTB, which is an off-track betting parlor, that also has a restaurant, so it's a little bit nicer. And we would, sit down, have a meal, have some drinks, and bet the card at, it was at the time Aqueduct and at Santa Anita. I'm a very big horse racing fan. I've been into horses longer than I've been into poker, and both Pat and Roberto are guys who I've gone to the races with on many occasions. So we're at this OTB, and when I'm at OTBs, when I'm at the racetrack, I'm very businesslike. I approach horse racing in a very methodical, very businesslike fashion. I'm not interested in small talk. I'm not interested in any niceties. I'm there for war, and I'm plotting a campaign. And I proceeded as I normally do. At the same time, Roberto and Pat were drinking up quite a bit and enjoying themselves. And there's a fellow at the next table, very animated fellow, walking around with, to quote the Flintstones, a wad of bills that would choke a dinosaur. Mm-hmm. Real big wad of $100 bills, and talking up a storm. And they meet the guy, exchange business cards. The guy buys him some drinks. The fellow says he'd be very interested to meet me and talk horses with me because it's clear I know what I'm doing. And I say, well, I'm all for it, but after today's races are done. Mm-hmm. And that was when we first met Peter Falconee. So I was with 2 federal prosecutors, one a mafia buster, the other a stock fraud buster. I meet the guy there, and he has a business card. He explains that he works for a very famous, well-known professional gambler in Las Vegas. It says it on his business card. He takes the business cards from the 2 federal prosecutors. I don't have a business card. I received his. And so that's February 2002. That's chapter 1, and it's a pretty clean break. Then we fast forward to June of that same year, June of 2002. And I was out at the Meadowlands, which is a racetrack in northern New Jersey, just across the river from Manhattan. And in one of those bizarre quirks of fate that sometimes work favorably and sometimes work unfavorably, I was seated in a teletheater where they show horses, races, and you can bet, next to this fellow. And we look at each other, and we're like, hey, don't we know each other? And he remembers, yeah, you're the buddy of those 2 federal prosecutors. And I'm like, yeah, that's right. And we strike up a conversation, exchange information, and talk about horses. And he says, listen, and he explains he works for this very famous professional gambler, and he's a sports betting expert. And I say, you know, I really don't know much about sports betting, but I'd be interested in learning. He says, I'd love to learn from you about horses. You clearly, he says, I just dabble in horses, but I can tell you know what you're doing. You're a real expert. Okay, so we break apart, and he's back in Las Vegas, and I'm in New York. And for the entire month of July, okay, the entire month of July 2002, he and I talk on the telephone at least 3 times a day. We start up first thing in the morning talking about what races we like, what look interesting, what we plan to do. I go to where I'm betting that day in New York. He goes wherever about his day. Midday we check in how the races are going and so forth. And then at night we do a recap, okay? And this goes quite regularly. And he's strongly encouraging me to come out to Las Vegas, to come out and visit, let him show me how to do the town. So we come out, and he's just incredibly generous. He takes me out to dinner. My friends arrive. He takes us all out to dinner that cost him over $600. He says, he asks us if we've ever heard of the comedian Louis Anderson. And we all say, well, yes. And he says, how'd you like to go meet him and see a show? And I say, you know, that's really not necessary. It's a terrific thing. But he's like, oh, Louis is a good friend of mine. It's no skin off my back. If you guys like to do it, I'd love to do it for you. And Peter takes us to meet Louis Anderson. We go backstage. Louis and Peter hug and embrace. Louis says, anybody who's a friend of Peter Falconee is a friend of mine. It's great to meet you guys. We get primo seats. You know, Louis very graciously says, listen, I enjoy having visitors and stuff, but I got to go do my little thing before the show, so please excuse me. We depart to go to our seats, which are primo seats. I don't know if you've ever seen a Louis Anderson show, but he has this shtick where he's working, you know, doing his thing, and then he needs to take a water break. And he goes to another part of the stage where he has a little table and a water cooler, and he stands around the water cooler and kibitzes with the audience as if he's taking a water break and talking on the break. And during one of the breaks, he says, oh yeah, by the way, those people, you guys who were friends with Peter Falconee, who I met before the show, you were really nice. You should always just feel free to come by and say hello anytime. I really enjoyed meeting you. This is in front of 5,000 people in this show. Okay, so that ends chapter 2.